Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson. I'm an adoptive mom of a vibrant and insightful 20-year-old son, Joey, who is striving to launch into adulthood. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. I'm also a certified coach helping primarily adoptive parents. Joey and I are committed to helping anyone impacted by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. I often suggest to other adoptive parents that the best thing we can do is listen to adult adoptees. As an adoptive parent of a transracially adopted person, I'm very interested to learn from adoptees with similar lived experiences. I adopted our son from Japan, and he has told me that he feels neither Japanese nor American. I am trying to better understand how that must feel so I can be more empathetic to my young adult son. Well, today's guest is going to help us all understand the many layers of lived experiences for many adoptees and others who find themselves straddling two or more identities. Anthony Lynch is a 24-year-old non-binary transracial adoptee living in London. They are the co-founder of In Between Lines, an organization that empowers individuals who have complex identities. Anthony and their colleagues create online content and in-person events to help people explore identity on their own terms. And I'm very excited to let you all know that they're also a steering group member for a forthcoming Parliamentary inquiry for adoptee voices. That sounds amazing. So let's all learn from Anthony's lived experience and wisdom about everything in between. Welcome to Unraveling Adoption, Anthony. Glad you're here.
Hi, Beth. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Well, you are so young and are doing so many great things. I'm super impressed with you. And I just want to sit at your feet and learn from you because I just always am grateful to have young men that have been adopted that are willing to talk. And I just think, oh my gosh, I'm going to soak as much as I can in so I can help understand my son better. So I usually have adopted guests just fill us in about your origin story, however you'd like to do that. So you can start with that.
Yeah. So I was fostered at 8 days old in London, then was adopted at 20 months. My ethnicity is Jamaican on my biological mother's side, white, kind of depending on which DNA test you use on my father's side. So that's another layer of confusion there. Mm-hmm. But I was adopted to a Scottish mother and a Monstrasian father who themselves had two biological daughters. So I grew up in a mixed family. And funnily enough, after all that complexity, we all kind of looked like each other and it made sense for me to be in that family. We also adopted another younger brother. So there's 4 kids and 2 parents. And we're now all adults. And yeah, we grew up in a really multicultural place in London. And so despite all that complexity, grew up in a very diverse place.
Okay. Where did you say your adoptive dad is from?
Montserrat, which is an island in the Caribbean. It's a British overseas territory.
Wow. Okay. So I need to learn better geography. So all 4 kids, 2 adopted and 2 birth kids are all biracial.
Yes.
And you all kind of look alike.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Were you able to not hide on purpose necessarily, but people probably didn't go, you must be adopted if you looked like your siblings?
Yeah. So I had a different experience to many adoptees who grew up as an of-color person in like a white majority place. I was able to hide my adoption. And so I kind of grew up having to choose whether to disclose my adoptive identity to people. And funnily enough, being a child, I didn't really want to deal with any of that. So I just pretended, and it felt really difficult when people would ask me, where am I from? Because I could either disclose this super traumatic adoptive story, or I could just be like, oh, I'm just from Scotland, or I'm from Montserrat. And so I would play with it. I would sometimes be like, I'm half Jamaican, half English, and just like kind of be creative with it. But ultimately it kind of felt like I wasn't expressing myself in my fullness, which I think is why I've made such an attempt to make a career out of it.
Yeah, you're building a career out of being in between everything. Mm-hmm. I think that's remarkable. And I can't imagine how that must feel to be asked such a common question, unfortunately, where are you from? And have to calculate, okay, how much do I want to tell this person? Like, that must weigh on you. And that probably happened when you were really little. And like, how does it deal with that? Can you help us understand?
Yeah, so I think as a child, I just found it really hard. I don't think there was a lot of dealing with it, and there was a lot of pretending. Okay. But I think since especially in my sort of professional life, I use my lived experience every day to help inform policy and research. So it's upfront, it's there. I kind of just view my adoptee identity as similar to a lot of like my other identities, like non-binary. The fact I'm British, the fact I'm Jamaican white. It's just something added to just all of my intersections. And yeah, there's not really any shame with that anymore, which is amazing.
Absolutely. That's great. It's interesting that you have to decide, consciously, and you're purposely deciding to release that you're an adopted person to help other people. But I don't suppose people think often that adopted people, unless it's really, really, really clear that you're transracially adopted, a lot of adopted people would have to make that choice on the daily, I guess. Who needs to know this information? What criteria do you, or maybe before you started being an activist in the area, but what criteria goes through your head? Like, do they really need to know this?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this recently in terms of the mark of someone being a really good friend of mine when I was a child was if I would tell them that I was adopted.
Oh.
And it would be like, hey, we've known each other for a bit, sort of. And so now let me give you all the details. And so it was like almost a marker of intimacy with really good friends. And I trust you with this information because it wasn't that many times I was bullied during school, but when it did happen, it was really salient and really obviously distressing. So it was kind of like a trusting to be my wholeness in front of people rather than just this presenting. So,
And you're also non-binary. And I wonder, how old were you when you came out as non-binary? And has that been easier or harder than being adopted as far as the coming out part?
The non-binary identity, it's been emerging over sort of the past 6 months, but I think it's something that's happened throughout my life.
Sure.
I kind of realized that I was non-binary last summer.
Oh, really recently?
Really recently. Okay. I realized that I was using masculinity or my male identity in the same way that I was pretending not to be adopted.
Okay.
Or pretending to be fully black in some situations, then fully white in some situations, molding to whatever was needed of me. And I was speaking to my sisters about it, and they were like, we had a very non-binary relationship when you were younger, and like I would dress in tutus and like a lot of their clothes, and they would do a lot of makeup and stuff like that. And it was really special and sweet. And then one of my sisters was like, you went to secondary school, which is like high school. And then they just saw the layers of masculinity just get put on, and it was just barriers of separation. And I wonder how much of that non-binary identity was generated by my adoption when I just was fundamentally really afraid of social interaction growing up and then would have to mask to fit in. And I made a point of not researching my non-binary identity as opposed to like, I'm very clued up on my adoptee identity and like mixed identity and how that all ties into sort of societal narratives. But I've found myself not wanting to explain why and just being comfortable in that my preferred pronouns are they, them. And it's fine if I still present as a man, but that's my preferred pronouns and I don't need to justify myself. I think that a lot of the adoptee process is about coming up with a narrative that suits you, but also, especially in my line of work where you're doing a lot of public speaking and workshops, how much of that can morph into having a shield or having a personality or having a presented version, having to be digestible to people as opposed to just, this is who I am and got to accept it.
Yeah. I admire you greatly for being able to do that at such a young age. And I see kids coming up nowadays, boggling the minds of their parents, but whatever. But they're being so brave and authentic and trying to make sense of this world and who they are in it. And I just admire anyone that is able to do that. And you bring up a couple of times, you said the combination of being an adoptee and non-binary and mixed race. Can you tell us what that is like to be multiple intersections? What do you call it? Is that intersectionality? Is that what you call it?
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. And I've only recently come into this once I've been writing a research paper on complex identities. So essentially, intersectionality is about how multiple systems of identities can contribute to create unique forms of individuals and also oppression. And it's a lens of looking at social problems rather than looking at a social problem through a race only or a class only perspective. How do we look at multiple of them? And so a lot of my lived experience has been about having a complex intersectional relationship with myself and the world because I'm mixed. So I'm equally as white as I am black. So I have two identities in the category of race. And then also I'm split between two families. And that's the way I kind of viewed my adoption.
Yes.
But a lot of the way that society works in terms of like, again, small talk, where are you from, is that they're looking to simplify that. And so, you know, my surname is my adoptive family's name and my biological surname is one of my middle names, but that's hidden from people. And then similarly being mixed, that's always been subsumed in the black existence until really recently. So a lot of my work is around how do we not just find and account for complexity between categories of race, gender, culture, but also complexity within those categories. And so that's kind of led me to the work I'm doing now.
Yeah. It's fascinating. It's sort of blowing my mind. And we do love boxes. God help us. We love putting people in boxes. Like, you know, I'm in the US and well, everybody probably knows about Obama and he was our first black president, but he was mixed. So do we just delete the part that he's mixed and he's black because that's easier because we have to choose one? Is that the kind of things you deal with a lot as a mixed person?
Yeah, I find myself, again, I think I've done so much work on it. And again, starting my career, I didn't want to compromise. So I've been very clear on being a mixed non-binary adoptee and have kept my boundaries of that. And I think also the fact that I was adopted cut me off from a lot of my Jamaican heritage and cultural connections. And so I feel that my blackness, because identity generally isn't just about, you know, the color of your skin, it's culture, it's customs, it's traditions, it's spaces, environments. A lot of that was lost to me or expressed in a different way through my adoptive dad. So it's just about how do we account for all of these and just have a bit more of a sophisticated conversation on identity rather than just labeling.
Yeah, that's what it takes, right? More depth instead of just, you must be blank and fill in one word there. Yeah, it's more nuanced and it takes more time and more energy, I suppose, for people to dig into more details of a person's identity. But it's so important because you don't want to just pick one.
Yeah.
Like one or the other, you're both three different ways.
Yeah.
So I can see that would create a lot of conflict. And in your experience in your young life, how has that struggle or that tension between all those in-between identities, how has it affected you day to day? What does it do to you?
So I find that people's perceptions of me require a lot more. I have to explain a lot more in order to get people to understand who I really am, essentially. Okay. And I've kind of got it down to an art now that I've learned how to describe aspects of my identity with a lot of precision and succinctness. Okay. And I guess a lot of subconscious cues of how much time do we have? How much do I trust this person again? But I think also it's really helped me to forge my own individuality. As much as there's difficulties, I believe there's also potential for joys. And I know that I've been able to be in so many different spaces. And despite everything that's happened to me with my adoption, it's been really cool. I've been in a lot of different areas and can connect with lots of different people. And so it's just been about turning that sort of switch from glass half empty to glass half full. And I just want to be clear that this experience isn't just restricted to people of color or adoptees. I'm pretty sure that the experience of a working class individual, like the first person to then go to university and then find themselves surrounded by people who are upper class or middle class and they don't feel like they belong. You don't need to be a person of color to experience that. You don't need to be an adoptee to experience that. Yeah. I think everyone has had this experience of feeling like they're in two places or even more than that, but not quite enough of any. And it's like, how do we create a framework that allows everyone in the world to talk about their identity in a complex way? Yeah. Everyone's got a complex identity, in my opinion.
Yes. Well, I bet when you created your organization In Between Lines and started having events, I bet people like, oh, people understand me. It must have been really wonderful. Can you let us know how that feels for you as the co-creator and what experiences people have had in your groups?
Yeah. So just for context, In Between Lines started at the end of my degree, so about 20 months ago. And it was with 3 or 4 other people, and we were on an internship with the Exeter Decolonizing Network. And we kind of just sat down and realized that we had really similar experiences despite growing up in 5 different countries.
Wow.
Of just feeling like multiple spaces but don't belong in any of them. And so we created an exhibition about our experiences, and that ended up touring 3-4 places, selling over 200 tickets, been really amazing.
Wow.
And just the vibes and the energy when we've got like a conversation panel or a poetry night in the space with all of the art and text is just really amazing. And everyone can just write on the walls, because we have like post-it notes with questions that anyone can answer, like, has anyone mistaken your parent for someone else? Or what sort of important cultural influences have you had? And they're not geared towards adoptees or mixed heritage individuals, it's towards everyone. And I think everyone just kind of realizes that this isn't just about them, it's about me, and it's about how we navigate these relationships that we have with our family and our cultures. And
it must feel wonderful to have people go, oh yeah, I've been through that before. That must be really great. If people wanted to get involved with your organization, how would they do so?
So currently we are on Instagram as inbetweenlines.org. You can search for us on LinkedIn and Twitter as well with that handle. But currently what myself and Zoe, who's my colleague, are doing at Quorum is that we're writing a paper on complex identities, which is kind of what the community of In Between Lines is about. And well, we found a way of situating it in the literature, and we're going to present some sort of tips for organizations and policymakers to cater for these groups, because this group also includes like refugees or immigrants, anyone who's moved, spaces, and just really open to getting more stories, more perspectives on this lens. It's really not just about myself or Zoe. It's like, how do we get everyone involved?
Yeah. So organizationally, are you wanting fewer check boxes and you have to pick one box or the other, that kind of thing? That's kind of basic, but would that help?
Well, I know that the time lag with these sorts of things is decades for adapting a lot of this work. So I'm not hoping for anything really, really soon. But what I'm looking for is, especially with qualitative research, so interviews, and especially with what's called the researcher stance. So when the researcher reflects on their own positionality and how that affects the research, we can get them when they're thinking about care experienced individuals or mixed heritage individuals or anyone who's moved cultures to think about their own positionality and get in that empathic mindset of having a complex identity. And I think that that can really help build trust between the researcher and the research participant. And also thinking about the mental health implications, because a lot of, again, this is all anecdotal evidence, but we're trying to build something for this. A lot of conversations I've had with people have been about, you know, I haven't felt fully seen in my identity, or I haven't been able to find a community, or I've had to pretend to fit in with one of the dominant groups that I'm associated with but aren't completely aligned with. And so I'd be really interested thinking about the mental health implications of having this multiple. And this can extend to also like speaking multiple languages. And I only speak English, but people who have part of their identity in one language, and then when they've switched over, they have it in another language and then can't really express themselves in either of them, at least fully. So yeah, just thinking about those sort of consequences and how we can continue this conversation.
That's fascinating. So you recommend that anyone, maybe parents or anyone leading groups of people, to really consider their own intersectionality. What if a person, because I'm trying to think, I don't think I have any in-betweenness in my own life. Do I? I don't know. But like, I'm a lesbian and I'm an adoptive mom and I'm white, woman, teacher, you know, I can kind of just analyze my own identities. And would that even be helpful, just to be more aware of what I bring to the table?
Yeah, definitely. That as a starting point is really, really important. But also I am trying to find a way to explain, or to, because I really believe that everyone has a complex identity. And it's just that some people have to look further in order to get it, because maybe it's just seen as such a given. I don't really know what that kind of feels like, to have your identity just be a given and for it to be simple. But yeah, always consider your own positionality. But I think it's just having awareness of the fact that people can be sort of split and have multiple identities. And then, especially for adoptive parents, to work out how can we tap into this? How can we make sure that our child has cultural influences from multiple streams? And
Yeah, both or however many.
Yeah. I think one huge part of it is moving from an either or mentality to a both and mentality, not trying to force people to pick one, whatever the dominant one is, and not switching, but how can you fuse and integrate a lot of that work? I think a lot of my process of healing over the past few years has been about how do I not switch personalities or sides of myself in order to do better? And, it does seem cool when I'm able to interact in multiple spaces, but then also how much am I compromising when I do that? Yeah. How much am I compromising with myself, and can I just be there in my wholeness?
Yeah. Your whole authenticity, all of it, all combined. And how can we all allow people to be all of who they are and not expect them to just jump into certain boxes? Ooh, you've given us a lot to think about. I think this is really great. And it's something that I don't hear too many people talking about. And I think that you are doing a great job of, you're going to be talking to the Parliament in 2 days. Is that right?
So not exactly 2 days, but I will be. So there is a all-party parliamentary group on adoption and permanence. And so in the UK, that involves politicians from all parties coming together to try and produce policy evidence. And they're doing an inquiry for the general election. That's going to happen this year on adoptee voices, on the needs and priorities of adoptees.
Wow.
And so I'm part of the steering group for that, which is such an amazing opportunity. Wow. And some of that will involve writing sections as a report. Some of that will involve going into Parliament and having consultations with ministers and MPs. And part of that is going to include complex identities and how we can think about adoptees who themselves have a complex identity in having multiple families. But sometimes they also can have complex identities in class when they move, and then also in ethnicity, and then also in nationality if they move across borders, and just how we can just have these conversations in a bit more of a way that empowers them rather than puts them in a box.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. Well, I'm so impressed with England that is listening to adoptee voices on the parliamentary level. There's no way we would do that here at this point. We're trying, but man, that's great. And I'm glad such a great adoptee advocate is out there speaking out like yourself. So thank you for that great work. How can we best support you in your organization or yourself? What can we do?
That is a fantastic question. I would say potentially just connecting or following me on LinkedIn would be fantastic at the moment. And then I'm hopefully going to be definitely will be publishing the report next month, and that will go up on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And it will be great to share that
so we can read that.
To disseminate to anyone who you think might find it helpful, especially if someone who has felt like they kind of don't fit in anywhere. I think such a huge part of the healing process is realizing that you're not alone in that, and how that's incredibly normal, and that there's a whole community of people who share these things. And also the fact that you don't need to have the exact same intersections. What's made In Between Lines so amazing is that we have people who aren't adopted, people who aren't mixed, people who aren't people of color, who can still connect. And I think Audre Lorde's insight that difference can be a source of creativity and a source of connection. You don't just need to have narrow interest groups for each identity. I think if we're all talking in the same sort of level of sophistication, then you can still have those feelings of community and connection that we all crave and need for healing and happiness.
Absolutely. Okay. I think that's the mic drop right there. That's great. Is there anything that is going on with In Between Lines that we can participate in?
Yeah, so currently myself and Zoe are producing a new exhibition with a professional photographer where we've got 12 people with complex identities from Suriname, Malaysia, Polynesia, Nigeria, Mexico, USA, Belgium, India, just all over the world. And with every single intersection that you can imagine of culture, race, family, nationality, queer identity. And we've taken pictures of them, and we're halfway through creating the exhibition from podcast recordings that we've done with them. Oh, wow. And so we're hoping to release a few of those images online and then eventually find exhibition venue to host them in the summer, which would be really amazing. Oh. And so what's really cool about this project is that obviously myself and Zoe have complex identities, but the photographer, Philip Sinden, he is a Scottish Pakistani adoptee as well. So it's been, everything is created by people with complex identities, and all the participants are as well. So it's just just the complexities of identity. And I'm really excited to finish producing it and eventually get it out there.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I can't wait to see bits of it. And if anyone knows of a gallery space, is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I'm kind of about the manifestation, manifesting it. We're looking for spaces in London, hopefully.
We have a lot of listeners in England, so just let us know. Sounds great. And on Instagram, is it InBetweenLines.org?
InBetweenLines.org.
Okay.
Yes. And I forgot to mention, we also have a website called InBetweenLines.co.uk.
Okay. So I'll make sure and put the Instagram and your website in the show notes so anyone can go look you up and support your wonderful work. Thank you so much for being such a bright light in the space. Appreciate it. And thank you for coming to talk to our audience today.
Thank you. I'm a big fan of your podcast, and I just love the sheer breadth of people that you have on and perspectives. And I find that it's just about creating spaces to have this level of conversation and connection. So thank you so much, Beth.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I love the podcasting because we get to have a longish conversation. It's not just a soundbite. It's not just a meme on whatever. Not that those are bad either, but I love these conversations and to get to really trying to understand each person. I think that's really valuable. So I hope this has been really helpful for a lot of people. And listeners, make sure and share this episode with anyone you know that might be in between themselves or have a complex identity and be thinking about our own identities and how we label people and put people in boxes. And I think this will help us all to be more whole and authentic. And while you're at it, go look up Unraveling Adoption at unravelingadoption.com. There's lots of ways to support us or to join in the events and things that we produce there. So go check us out there. And I think that's it. So thank you everyone for listening to this episode. And Anthony and I want you all to stay safe.